So I don't know how gifted I am, but I did marry up. I have a very attractive redheaded wife, and we have 4 beautiful children outside of the womb, and we just found out 2 days ago that we're pregnant with our 5th. So we're procreating with reckless abandon. So, what Steve didn't tell you is when I was trying to exercise those gifts or find my way in what God was calling me to do, when I first joined Focus, Sean Dalton, a regional director and good friend of mine in youth ministry, called me out of my youth ministry job, so to speak. And he called me after I prayed in adoration for God to direct me into what I was supposed to do with the rest of my life. I'd done 4 years of youth ministry and felt pretty comfortable in that, but had a holy yearning to do whatever God wanted me to do. And so what happened is that I get an email from Sean right after I get out of adoration, and it says, "Come to Colorado, be a missionary on campus." So that's pretty intriguing. But what Sean didn't tell me is that I would be moving all the way across the country, my wife 8 months pregnant, and had this really quirky thing where you raise your own salary, right? And I knew that couldn't be a temptation from Satan, because Satan would put some money in the deal, right? And so my wife and I and our 2, almost 3 children at that point, trust me, I'm pro-life, I'm just saying the child wasn't out of the womb yet. But our 2, almost 3 outside of the womb children packed up and went to Colorado in a U-Haul and a minivan and parked our car in the parking lot of the church with the U-Haul. Met Father Don Willett, the pastor at our new assignment. And I said, "It's nice to meet you. Is it okay if I park that truck out there?" And he said, "Sure." And thence the journey began. What are we laughing about? No, I'm just... But it's like 15,000 lights up here. It's like instant dehydration. If somebody could pass the chapstick back up here. So, real quick, I want to introduce you to our youngest little gem, Cecilia. No, you get away. His name's not Cecilia. So this is my youngest little gem, and that's my hot redheaded wife. But so this way, even if my talk is really horrible, you'll give me some sympathy because I have cute kids, right? We always said that we'd stop having kids when we started having ugly ones, and so far they've all been really attractive, so mostly my wife's genes. Any redheads in the audience? You guys are going extinct. It's awesome. But I'm doing my part to try to get some more, okay? So I hope that you guys will humor me tonight. I'm going to share with you my story, and I hope it relates to some of your story. But I want to start off by saying the church has a phrase, cor ad cor loquitur, and that Latin translates as heart speaks to heart. And I pray to God tonight that my heart would speak to your heart. I might say some things tonight that you'll say to yourself, "I'm not as bad as he is, or as bad as he was." Or, "I'm worse than he was, and God can't meet me where I'm at." But if I can encourage you anything tonight with my talk, I'll just encourage you that God is willing to meet you wherever you're at. And that listen to my heart and my story, because I bet your heart feels the same way. So I grew up a kid of not very intense material means or even spiritual means. My dad was a machinist and worked 40, 50 hours a week. and my mom worked different part-time jobs, was never really home when I came home from school, try to make ends meet. And we had a house that I didn't realize at the time was pretty poor by my neighborhood standards. I guess you don't notice that as a kid. But I remember the first time I felt a sense of peace as a kid. It was Christmas, and I think I was 6 years old turning 7 or 7 years old turning 8. And the deal was that at night my parents would turn all the lights off in the house, and just the Christmas tree would be lit. And I remember climbing out of bed real early in the morning one night, probably 3 a.m. or something, and sitting by that Christmas tree. And the blinds on the window were cracked just a little bit. And there were those huge, the big snowflakes were just falling. And the street light outside of our window, you could just see them. And I was sitting by that tree, and it was warm, and everything was okay. As a kid, I always felt like a square peg in a round hole world, like I just didn't fit. I was always comparing my insides to your outsides. And on the outside, you looked like you had it all together. So that experience, that first time of peace, man, it was tremendous, and it stuck with me. Really did stick with me. But that was fleeting and soon lost. I had the pleasure of having an older friend in the neighborhood. You guys all know this kid. If there are any parents and children in the room, please take them out for part of my story. But he told me there was no Santa Claus. And I went and I walked inside to my mother, and I sat on her waterbed. It was the 80s, waterbeds. And I walked inside and sat on her waterbed, And I said, "Mom, is it true what Derek said? Is there no Santa Claus?" And she said, "John, Santa Claus is the spirit of Christmas." Now, I don't know if I'm a very bright kid or not, but I put 2 and 2 together immediately. I didn't grow up Christian, but I went to a lot of vacation Bible schools because they had free pizza and you could swim in your neighbor's pool and stuff like that. And so the deal was that I said, so if Santa's just the spirit of being nice, then Santa's just the spirit of Christmas, then God's just the spirit of being nice, right? And my mom kind of stood there confused as to what to say, I guess, as most moms would. And I just kind of went about my business. So I thought that peace that I experienced was something made up, that couldn't be real. So I proceeded to live my life in such a way, that peace gave me a sense that my dad was an alcoholic. And sitting by that tree that night, before my mom told me about the reality, sitting by that tree, I forgot for a second that my dad was alcoholic. And I forgot for a while that we were poor and I didn't have all the cool clothes that other kids had or the right shoes. I forgot that I got made fun of for being fat when I was a kid. Don't get me wrong, I made fun of everybody else, so I deserved it, right? But I forgot about all that for a second. I forgot about that feeling of not belonging. So I grew up that way. I grew up and I lacked peace. As I said, my dad was a machinist, my mom worked, and they smoked a lot of weed together, and my father would frequently get DUIs in the middle of the week, and I'd have to miss school in order for my mom to go bail him out of jail. My dad was one of those guys that seemed 1,000 feet tall to me. I think most of you in the audience tonight probably relate to that. Your dad just seems like 1,000 foot tall and he's bulletproof. My dad was a standout high school athlete in football. He was the type of guy that everybody liked. He had a milieu of friends, right? Just a ton of friends. He placed third in the state of Ohio in arm wrestling one year. I mean, dude was legit. I used to brag about that story to my friends. And then, I don't know, you remember the Sylvester Stallone movie? Remember the one Over the Top? Remember that? The arm wrestling movie? He breaks the guy's arm in it. My dad broke a guy's arm wrestling. How am I ever going to live up to that? You know? He did it over a bet over a beer. I want that, you know? So I grew up that way. I was always chasing my father's blessing, if you will. I went to middle school, and all of a sudden I wasn't the fat kid anymore. I was pretty strong, and I was pretty good at football, and I was fast for how big I was. And I was practicing a lot, so I'm slimming down a little bit, losing some of the baby fat, if you will. That's what my grandma always said. You'll skinny up soon, you know? And I was good. I practiced with the high school football team, did their 2-a-days, things like that in 6th and 7th grade. And all of a sudden, it didn't feel as much like I was a square peg in a round hole world. It felt like maybe, just maybe, I had an opportunity to fit in. In my 7th grade year, everything was great. My dad stopped drinking. He was still smoking a little weed, but Dad was okay when he was smoking weed. He was just a horrible person to be around when he was drunk. And that year we got through middle school. It was my 7th grade year of middle school. The Catholic Church has a doctrine on middle school. It's called hell, right? You guys remember middle school? It's a rough place to be. Or at least it was for me. But that 7th grade year was awesome. And it wasn't awesome because my dad lost his job, but it was awesome because my dad was home every day and he was sober for the most part. And that Christmas, it was an epic moment in every young man's life when this happened. Do you guys remember when the first adjustable, movable gorilla goal came out? Do you remember that? The basketball goal that you could move everywhere and adjust down to like 3 feet and finally do the Michael Jordan 360 dunk and be like, wasn't that so cool? And they're like, no, you didn't even have to jump. It's like 3 feet off the ground. But we didn't have much money, and my dad bought me one of those from Christmas. And he was laid up on the couch because he had just had foot surgery just after Christmas, and we just talked smack every day. Every day. I'm going to beat you at basketball. No, I'm going to beat you. I brought you into this world. I'll take you out, son. And just talking smack, you know? It was like the best time of my life. It was like that experience with Christmas before. I was a little bit of a problem child. I don't know if you can tell by me right now. I mean, I'm pretty cleaned up and doing okay, I suppose, as a missionary. But I always had a real problem with authority. I was pretty sarcastic. And I get suspended from school a lot. And so one day I was suspended from school because I had smarted off to a teacher and also gotten in a fight after I smarted off her with another kid. And my mom wakes me up. John. And I said, what are you waking me up for? I'm suspended. This is the only good part about it. You get to sleep in. I'm going to get zeros. At least I can sleep till 9 or 10, right? And she like half apologized. I don't know why. She should have hit me in the mouth. But she said, your dad's having some chest pains. We're just going to take him to the hospital real quick before the insurance runs out. No big deal. Go back to sleep. We'll be back in an hour and a half or so. And in the next instance, I hear my mom scream. And I run out of bed and I run into the living room and I see my dad sitting on the couch and he's in massive convulsions. And my mom's on the phone with 911. I can hear her in the background, but everything slows down. My dad, the guy that was 1,000 feet tall, is dying on the couch. And in the chaos of everything, my mom and my dad load into the ambulance. They go to the hospital. And the volunteer firefighter that was supposed to transport me was a friend of my dad's, and he forgot about me. So here I am, a 12-year-old boy, sitting in my house after this completely terrifying event, and I'm praying to a God that I never believed in or never knew. God, don't let my dad die. And I'm thinking about how awesome that year was, about how my dad was sober and how we were talking and how we were going to play that game of basketball, and don't let my dad die because we still got to play that game. About an hour later, my grandmother shows up and takes me to the hospital. And they take us into a little room. And the doctor says to my wife, "Mrs. Leyendecker, I regret to inform you, we did everything we could. But at 8:34 a.m. this morning, your husband died." And they said, "Would you like to see your husband and your dad one last time?" So my mom and I walked back alone to view my father laying on a hospital bed, covered up with a sheet to hear. And I remember my mom walking over to the bed. I couldn't even approach it. It seemed like a mile between me and that bed. And my mom tucking my dad in and saying, "Fred, you look so cold." And I knew in that moment that there was no God that you told me about in Vacation Bible School. I knew that you had lied. Because what kind of loving God would take a 12-year-old boy's father that still had a game of basketball to play? So I decided right then and there that there was no God. And if there was, he didn't do anything for me. So I didn't care about him. And I proceeded to live my life in a very prodigious or prodigal way. Remember walking out of that hospital and everybody telling me that I was the man of the house now. And I didn't know what that meant. All I knew is that the man of the house drank and smoked weed. So that's what I needed to do. That week, I went over to my mom's friend's house. She went over there to get some friendship or fellowship or whatever. And I remember walking up to the corner store with my friend, my mom's friend's son, Adam. And we walked up to that corner store and we stole some 40 ounces of Colt 45 and proceeded to get drunk. And from that day on, I stayed drunk for about the next 3 years, drunk or high. And to give you a glimpse into my background, my friend Adam that I walked up to that store and stole those 40 with died of a heroin overdose 2 months ago. And I can't tell you why I'm here and he's not. So I proceeded to live the way of the life that I had to live. Because that God-sized hole in my heart that was as big as an ocean but as small as a pin that an ocean of pleasure could never fill, I had to at least chase it and try. And so just like I played football and just like I did everything else, I pursued it fast. I immediately started drinking every day, selling drugs. I was expelled from 5 different schools successively for different things, weapons, fighting, smoking weed in the school, whatever it was, right? But I remember my highlight is I got expelled from homeschool, right? Homeschooling, how do you do this? You got to be messed up, right? But I remember my school district said, We can't have you in school anymore. We have a program that's for the severely handicapped or people that have been in tragic accidents. A teacher will come to your house and teach you. We'll send her to your house. Cool. I don't have to go to school? Nope, just do your work. Okay. So she showed up for the second home visit, and I said some heinous things to her while I was busy smoking weed, and she decided to leave and not come back. So that's how I was expelled from homeschool. My mom and I lived in a neighborhood that was a good neighborhood, good people, good Christians. I told you about that, took me to vacation Bible school and did all that stuff. Fed me free pizza, let me swim in the pool, and taught me to braid 3 candles in honor of the Trinity. My daughter is really grateful today because I braid her hair, all because of those candles, okay? They taught me something at least, right? And I was such a bad child. And they had to call the police to my home so often, 64 times in 30 days actually to be exact, maybe 62. The officer knew my mom's work number by heart. I was hiding runaways in my house. I was selling dope out of my house, all this stuff. And you ask where my mom is, but by this point my mom and I were smoking weed together, drinking together, doing some crazy stuff together. Because my mom was just as hurt or more hurt than I was. My mom's a drug addict and alcoholic, just like I was. But my neighbor, who was the good Christian guy, showed up to my door and explained to my mom and I that he had a petition signed by every neighbor in the neighborhood that my mom and I needed to move out of our house because I was that much of a trouble in the neighborhood. And I emphasize the fact because when that guy did that and when that guy said that and the things that he said to my mom after that I won't mention, I knew he was the Christian guy. Another click in my head. If that's what Christianity is, I don't want anything to do with it. Why didn't that older man who saw a young boy's father die try to mentor me, try to spend time with me, try to invest in me? I can't answer that. So we lived in a suburb of Cincinnati. We moved into the city because we didn't have much money. And I proceeded to sell drugs and do all the crazy stuff with reckless abandon. I'm fencing stolen goods across state lines. I grow out my hair in dreadlocks, which isn't a sign of depravity or badness, but I was just telling you that I didn't like to shower or brush my teeth. Not that people with dreadlocks don't shower, they do. I just didn't. And I started following the Grateful Dead and kind of being this amalgamation between a gangster, hanging out with people that carry guns and do really bad things, but I'm peace-loving hippie guy too on the side, and like a hippie that sags his pants and listens to rap, but also Jerry Garcia. So I lived this way, and it was fast, and it was furious, and it was crazy. And I'll fast forward, one night, my mom and I were getting high. Another friend of mine, Dave's in prison. I hang out with a real host of good characters, right? And we're getting high, and for about the 4th time, my heart felt like it was starting to give out and things were really wrong. I felt really sick. And my mom ended up taking me to the emergency room. Things were really bad. And I was hooked up to an EKG machine. And I said, I had always said in my life I never wanted to be like my dad. I never wanted to be like my dad. I wanted to be better than my dad. My dad was 1,000 feet tall. I wanted to be 2,000 feet. But here I was, almost 16 years old, hooked up to an EKG machine. I had given myself a heart murmur from the amount of dope that I had used. My hands and my skin was beginning to turn jaundiced because of the damage I had done to my liver, which I still carry a little bit of it to this day because of drinking so much. And the doctor looked at me and said, "You will not live to 18 years of age unless you stop using drugs and alcohol." And I didn't know what to do because I knew I couldn't stop. I had tried to stop before and I couldn't. And so I went home and I prayed to a God I didn't believe in. Can you imagine that, me praying again? Can you imagine drugs and alcohol getting me to that kind of point where I prayed again to a God I hated and didn't believe in, all at the same time? But I did. I cried out to God that night, and I was crying, and I said, God, you got to take my life or give me something better. And that week, somehow, by the grace of God, I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I began to get sober. And I started to do some crazy stuff in my life. I started to go back to all the houses that I had robbed or broken into and made amends for the stuff I did. And I started praying to a God I didn't believe in, and things started to get real different in my life. I started snowboarding and mountain biking and enjoying life, and all of a sudden that hole in my heart was starting to go away a little bit. It was Christmas time again, and we were at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. I was there. And the topic was gratitude. If you guys are familiar with AA, what happens is there's topics, and you get up and speak about it. Hi, I'm John. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, John. So I was at that meeting, and I was at a podium kind of up in front of not this many people, but up in front of probably 100 people or something. It was Christmas. The topic was gratitude. It was Christmas Eve, as a matter of fact. And I remember for the first time experiencing God. And I looked down at that podium and I said, I'm John, and I'm an alcoholic. And I said, I'm grateful, and I'll call my mom a bitch or a whore today. And I started crying. And I don't say those words to scandalize anyone. I don't want you to walk out of this room and tell me about how I shouldn't have used those words or anything like that. I want you to know about how bad my life has gotten that I would speak to my mom and women that way. I'll not mention from this stage how I treated women. And I will not mention all the drama that I went through. The fact that I had an all-points bulletin out for my arrest as early as age 13. Or the number of felonies I almost went to jail for. And I was wrapped in light, and I was surrounded. And I started crying. I mean, I had never cried before when I wasn't mad, I wasn't sad, no one had died, and I had never cried in absolute gratitude before. And the cool thing was, I told you guys that I used drugs, and I drank with my mom, and I sold dope to people and did all this stuff. And I was sober about 3 or 4 months in that Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and my life was changing drastically. But my mom was sitting at that table, and she hadn't had a drink or a drug in over a month. And I can't tell you about what that meant. So I proceeded to live my life and seek this God that I didn't understand, but I felt like was entering into my life in some way. And crazy things were happening. I went out to Salt Lake City to snowboard and get my life together kind of thing. I was sober, and I looked around and I saw the mountains, and I thought, there's got to be a God. There's got to be a God that knows truth, that made all this, and I don't know how I thought that or why, but I was praying regularly in the morning and at night at that point. And I prayed to a God I didn't understand, and I said, God, if there's a truth, show it to me. And I moved back from Salt Lake City after snowboarding that winter, and I got my good enough diploma. You guys know about the GED, right? I got my good enough diploma and started taking community college classes. And it was crazy, because as soon as I got back, I was at an AA meeting, and I was hanging out there. When we back up, that morning, Thursday morning, I'm in prayer and meditation. At this point, I'm practicing kind of a Buddhist meditation. I'm burning some sage. Imagine me in the lotus position. I looked like Buddha. I was even chubbier then, you know. And I was sitting there in meditation. Before I went into meditation, I prayed. I said, God, I'll do whatever you want me to do, but it's got to be the truth. Please, God, show me the truth. Because he had showed me things. He had showed me things in my seeking of him. And I sat down in meditation, and it wasn't like Charlton Heston in the 10 Commandments, like, thou shalt, like, it was more like sitting in meditation, John, go to Mass. And I was like, whoa, go to Mass. That's crazy. I thought I was talking about rock bands and coffee Christianity, or like, even though I was chubby, like one of those red and yellow sash Tibetan monk suits, like going to Tibet sounded cool. And I was serious, like that sounded pretty okay to me. But not Mass. See, because after my dad died, one of the 5 schools I got expelled from was a Catholic school. I lasted there 5 days. 5 days. That's not good. So you can imagine my reaction to Catholicism, right? I won't tell you what I said to get kicked out. We'll leave that alone. But I said, okay, God, I was coming to a point to trust him. If it's your will, show me, I'll go, I'll do it, but you got to put it in front of me. And that night I go to an AA meeting where they don't talk about Christianity, they don't talk about Catholicism or Jesus, they talk about spirituality. It's kind of like the college campus, right? You can be spiritual, but you can't be religious, right? And my friend comes up to me after the meeting. Remember, I had this thing in meditation about Mass, had put that way on the back burner. And here I was, my friend John Trouth, who is closer to Crush the Turtle than he is to a normal speaking human being. You guys seen Finding Nemo? My friend Crush the Turtle comes up to me, John Trouth says, dude, I don't know what you're doing tonight, but I'm going to Mass if you want to go. Huh. That's strange that Crush the Turtle's asking me to go to Mass. And I immediately shot through my head, no, this guy's not, he doesn't go to Mass, that guy. I met people that went to Mass and they wouldn't let him in. There's no way. And he's like, dude, I didn't mean to offend you. And I'm like, see? Christians don't care about offending people. He wants to not offend people. Crush wants me to go to Mass. This can't be happening. And so the deal, I'm trying not to say the deal was or and I'm failing. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to be me. I went to Mass with Crush the Turtle. We piled in his Ford Explorer. He had 12-inch subwoofers in his car, blasting the Grateful Dead with bass. I think that's illegal. I don't know. But it was awkward to say the least. And we roll up to Mass and bust out of the car. He's burning incense in his ashtray. And we're listening to the Grateful Dead, and we're going to Mass. Who does that? So we go in, and I get my world rocked. Long story short, walk in, see the Blessed Mother, statue, candles. I go to this statue every summer and still thank her for my conversion. I walk in, not Charlton Heston, still same small voice. That's your mother. And I start crying like my 3-year-old son when he skins his knee, just sobbing. Trouth's like, dude, are you okay? I'm like, shut up, Trouth. So we go, Mass, sit, stand, kneel, burpees, Catholic calisthenics, whatever you guys do. And it comes to that part in the Mass, behold the Lamb of God, behold him who takes away the sins of the world. Happy are those who are called to this banquet. And the world stopped, and I knew 3 things in that very moment. I knew that Jesus was who he said he was, and that people had told me he was. That he was the Son of God. But I knew in that moment something that no one could ever make me believe. Not that he loved me, but that he actually liked me, that he delighted in me. And in the face of that love, I had nothing else I could do except to repent. And I sobbed for all that I had done in my life, how I had treated women, how I had treated my mother, the drugs that I had sold, everything that I had ever done because I had met love. And somehow, strangely, they didn't teach me in the 3 days or 4 days or 5 days I was at Catholic school, but I knew he was on the altar. I knew it. And I went up to the priest afterwards, Father Matthew Gamber, a good Jesuit, and I went up to him and I said, Father, that's what they call you, right? I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be Catholic. And Trout's like behind me, like, yeah, I got one. And I'm like, what's going on here? And he says, here, read this. And he hands me a brick called the Catechism. I don't read much, Father. I used to sell drugs. You want this back? Just read it. He applied to my ego. He said something like, you look like a bright kid. You can read that. Oh, yeah, I am bright. So I read it. And he said, read the Gospels too while you're at it. Read the 4 Gospels. I said, the what? He said, the Gospels. Charles like, dude, I'll show him. I got a Bible. And I'm like, okay, whatever just happened. Cool. So I go home, I start reading the Catechism, I can't put it down, and I start reading it, and I read the whole dang thing in about a week. Insane, right? I don't pretend to understand most of it, but I read it, and I remember being at an Indian food buffet, and I threw it on the ground. The little Indian lady is like, sir, are you okay? And I said, no, I'm not okay. I think I have to be Catholic. And right on cue, she says, would you like some more naan? And I'm just like shaking my head, you know? And I went to the Dominicans, where their novitiate is in Cincinnati, Ohio, at St. Gertrude's Church. And I went through RCIA because that good Jesuit directed me there, and came in under some really fantastic Dominican priests. And it was awesome because at that Easter vigil, my grandmother hadn't been to church, hadn't been to Mass since my father had died. And at that Easter vigil, she came and she started going back to Mass. And you know who also came to Mass that night? My mom came to Mass to see me get baptized. It's funny, my wife asked, what was your first confession like? That thing had to be huge. And I'm like, baptism. No confession. It was awesome. And even better than that is I discerned the priesthood, did all that. Spent a lot of time in prayer and adoration, had great formators around me. And about a year after my conversion, I knew I was supposed to be a priest. On a Saturday, I knew I was supposed to be a priest, told my mom and stepdad, which was cool because I was starting to have a relationship with my stepdad. See, my stepdad was a retired police officer, and I was growing weed in my closet and selling dope, so we didn't get along real well for a long time. And I told my step-grandma and my stepdad that I was going to be a priest, and they were sort of Christian. They were like, that's cool, you want a hot dog? We were like at a football game, you know? But I went to Mass that Sunday, met Trouth there at the Bellarmine Chapel at Xavier University where I went to school, and walked in, and I'm waiting for Trouth, and I'm looking around, and there's this redheaded girl I'd never really seen before. So I started talking to her, because I'm on a mission now. I'm going to be a priest. I'm going to turn lukewarm Catholics into convert-like Catholics. We're going to get set on fire here. Little did I know, my wife had been going to adoration like every day since she was in 3rd grade, daily Mass in high school, yada, 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 and had been praying for my dumb self that whole time, right? So I met my wife there that night at that church, and what happened was I was like, yeah, I'd love to really catch up with you, and she thought I was hitting on her, which I probably was, but I didn't know I was, sort of. And she's like, yeah, that'd be great to hear your story, yada, yada, blah. And so I don't think she was serious. Don't ask her, though. It hurt my feelings. But I don't think she was serious because I stalked her after that. And we didn't have Face Stalk then. We didn't have Facebook. So I did the next best thing. I knew her roommate, so I got her phone number, and I called her about 18 times every day until finally we hung out. And about 10 months later, 9 months later, I took that little redheaded girl hiking on the Appalachian Trail, and at the summit of her first mountain, I got down on one knee, and I promised that I'd be true to her for the rest of my life. And that's a pretty big moment for a guy that treated women like I did. My wife and I didn't have sex before we were married, and that was new to me. And I honored her and I cherished her. On our wedding day, my mother went to confession for the first time in 25 years and received communion at my wedding. And she goes to Mass every Sunday now and prays the rosary most days. I can't explain to you what my life has become, the fullness that's entered my life, especially through my children. I want to end this talk with a letter that I wrote to my son, and he's never heard this letter before. I usually give this talk, obviously, when he's not here. But I want to share with you one tidbit before that letter. If you take one thing away from this talk. In Catholicism, oftentimes the message that we share is, love the sinner, hate the sin. And in my understanding of Jesus and what I've come to experience with him, reading the Gospels and just how he's impacted my life, is that I need to love the sinner. And I need to hate my sins. I don't need to judge you. I need to love you, because when I came to Christ, it's because I was faced with love. And in the face of that love, there was nothing I could do except to repent. You have a Father that loves you dearly. And I told you about my dad and the gaping hole that his death left in my life. So I'd just like to share with you what God's done to my heart and what he's done in my relationship with my children. Every night when my children go to bed now, I lean down to my daughter, Anastasia, and I look at her and I tell her she's absolutely beautiful, and that she's captivating and she never has to earn my love, and that there's nothing she could ever do to make me stop loving her, and that she has an amazing king in heaven, a great prince that would come for her every time. And that man's Jesus. And she's my princess. I always say, Anna, why are you a princess? She says, because Jesus is my king. Oh, and I say, why are you so pretty? She says, because my daddy's handsome. I taught her that one too. That's not something you can come up with on your own. And I do the similar thing with my sons. Every night I bless their forehead and I tell them that I'm proud of them. That there's nothing they got to do to earn my love, that if everything was on the line, I'd give them the ball because I believe in them and I know they got what it takes. And every man wants to be told that in this room. And every woman wants to hear what I say to my daughters. It's the key to our heart, and God's whispering that to us tonight and in this conference. Dearest Maximilian, grace, blessing, and peace be to you in God our Father, and in Jesus Christ, his Son, our brother and Lord. It is my hope that one day you do hear this letter, which I guess you're hearing tonight. But even more, it is my earnest desire that you know the words of this letter because of how I loved you, cared for you, and guided you in your life. Yet I want to repeat a few things for your encouragement, Maximilian. As you know, my earthly father, your grandfather, died while I was yet a young man of 12. It is my prayer that you and I will be able to walk together many years beyond that time I had with my dad. But if not, be encouraged that God has allowed it for a reason. God did tremendous things in my life, Maximilian, after my earthly father died. In fact, I would have never known our Father in heaven if my dad hadn't died, for I would have never sought him. But as I said, it's my hope that we have much time together, and through that time that you would come to know the tremendous and overwhelming love that God has for you. Max, God has been so good to me. I write this with tears in my eyes as I remember holding you after you were born and thinking for only the second time in my life that I would gladly die for another person. The first person I thought this of was your mother. You might not believe me when I tell you how long and how hard I cried in gratitude to God for giving me you. As I write this letter to you, you're about 6.5. You've brought me so much joy, Maximilian. I've loved watching you grow up, and I'm reminded of the times that you and I have gone golfing together and have just delighted in the smile on your face. And all the times we've spent together. I think about how hard you work out and play soccer. My love and admiration for you don't rest on this, but Max, I really do think you'll be a hell of an athlete one day. But above all this, you are my son, and you have a holy gentleness about you. I am humbled watching you around your brothers and sisters. You really do serve them and love them well. You are a great big brother. You need to know how proud and pleased I am in you, Max. I am proud of you. As a man, you will need these words, Maximilian. I know you have what it takes. I repent and apologize for any times I was less an example of our Heavenly Father, because I really did try to love you as He does. Please forgive me. It is my deepest desire that you would love Christ and His church as I do. I'm not sure if you will, but you need to know that I have prayed every day of your life that you would. The young boy I see today has all the makings of a great man after God's own heart, a better man than I'll ever be. No matter where we are, Max, or what we have done, we cannot cast off the Father's love. I thank God for you, Maximilian. He's taught me so much through you. Thank you for every hug you gave me, Max, every moment we spent together, every ball we threw. You are my beloved son, and even more, you are God's. I love you, Max. Your dad, John. And if a guy like me can love my son like that, you can only imagine how the Father loves us. You have a Father in heaven that loves you. Thanks for your time.